Okay, hi. My name is Layla Swart, and I am the producer and editor of the film Knuckle City and co-owner alongside Jahmil of our company Yellowbone Entertainment.
Hi, I'm Jahmil Qubeka. I'm the writer and director of the film Knuckle City.
Awesome. Okay, so can you tell us what the origins were of the story? Because you initially, when we discussed the film, it was an inkling of an idea. What was it about a yesteryear's boxer story that was attractive to you?
Okay, well, I think the answer to your question has two sections. The first one is that growing up as a child who's always been fascinated with film, I've always looked at the landscape of growing up in that particular environment. Tanzania being a township that was fairly impoverished, but also it was part of a banana republic back then. You know, it was quite a unique world to live in, but you never question your environment. But however, though, being a lover of film, I've always seen the archetypes, literally on a day-to-day, in encountering these people. I've always felt that there's a movie to be had here, you know? And then growing up and then eventually being blessed enough to become a filmmaker, the concept has always been lingering in the back of my head. It's something that I've always wanted to do, but I kind of kept it in the back because, you know, it's a world of crime, of grit, of gangsters, of boxing. So these are particular tropes in regards to filmmaking that I wasn't necessarily at the time just keen to go for, you know? I mean, especially when I came out in filmmaking, everybody was trying to be the next Tarantino, you know? So I was definitely trying to avoid such archetypes as the criminal world. But then the second part of the answer to my question is that it came from also a meeting with yourself and the Zanzi Magic team when we came to pitch some ideas your way and trying to get a sense of what you were after in regards to your audiences. And I think even to this day, really where that partnership stems from is the passion to put distinctly African stories onto screen. So then when the opportunity came, pitching to you guys, you know, I dug in the back of my head. I was like, oh, wait, there's this old tale, you know, that could fit this particular mold. But I always felt that on a surface level, you know, immediately you recognize these archetypes, the tropes of gritty crime genre. But for me, I always felt that's just, I suppose, an entryway for even a global audience trying to find their sense in regards to understanding the material. But for me also, I knew there was way more depth to that because I knew that the characters that we were portraying and the world that we were portraying was more than just gangsterism and being cool around criminality and all of that. There was definitely a distinct psychology that we wanted to explore in the film. And at the top of it, really, I would say it's the idea around masculinity and what it means in today's environment and world. Always thought the boxing arena and space was a place that would be a great canvas to tell our story or to play out our story, simply because boxing is a highly disciplined sport. You know, yeah. Its practitioners require a huge amount of discipline to participate in boxing. In fact, for every 10 people you meet, 0.5 would be even able to engage that space. Yet, the people who exercise such discipline in what they do, you know, you can unfortunately make a relatively holistic indictment on the sport and its practitioners. I'm not saying everybody, but unfortunately, the record is not great in regards to their personal lives and how their situations play out with family, with spouses, with relationships. So I thought it was a great space for us to be able to play out and have this conversation around the relevance of masculinity, if you will, in today's world.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not restricted to the sport because it's quite universal in its exploration of masculinity.
Yes.
And I mean, there's a lot that's happening in the film that is quite like hectic, but what you've done, and I'm not sure if it's intentional, so I'd like to know if it was intentional, was that a lot of the the hecticness and the violence and the sensitive topics that were dealt with were balanced out with humor. And I wonder if that was intentional. Did you mean for that to play out that way, or was it in playing and rehearsing with your actors that you found that space?
Oh, humor is always a signature of mine when dealing with very serious subject matter. You know, I think it's a way to dilute the situation and to be able for you to make it palatable to the viewer as well, because there's only so much I believe a viewer can take, and before they start shutting the situation out. So it's not a glorification of the violence. It's not anything like that. But what you'll tend to find in traumatic experiences, people tend to laugh off a lot of what they go through. It's absolutely insane when you think about it in regards to how much people can take. And I have first-hand experiences of that. So I wanted to apply it also into the film as a way to deal with trauma. People laugh off their situation. I mean, you speak to victims of all sorts of trauma, and a lot of them have no other way but to deal with it in that way. So to me, it's an ode to the idea of dealing with pain. So yeah, it was definitely intended.
So I mean, you've touched a bit on Tanzania, and I want to know what, you know, a lot of times filmmakers come and when they pitch ideas, they speak about Johannesburg as a character or New York as a character, and then when you get the film, you don't get that sense of the character of the town that you're in. But you definitely feel it in this film. You feel a complete understanding of what this community is and what they deal with. So can you speak a little bit about the town as a character? Before in previous conversations, you've spoken about the spatial aspect of the town and how stories spill into the street. And then I also just wanted to ask Layla to add on to that by talking about what was it like filming there, because I believe it was one of the first films to be filmed in that area. What was the community's response like? So if you can just touch on those two levels.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'll start first. One of the most exciting things about making this film, I found, was to be in that space and to really integrate that community. Knuckle City is a film with a lot of additional moving parts, a lot of extras, a lot of bit players, and all of those came from Tanzania. So we really got a sense of the community through making this production and got to work with them in making the production. Our lead was trained by a professional boxing club there in Tanzania. And he also drew a lot of his character nuances from existing in that space and training with them. It was the first film to be shot in Tanzania, and their response was overwhelmingly wonderful. They opened up their homes to us. They gave us all the resources that we could possibly need to make it as authentic as possible. So as challenging as it was, because it's obviously not an area that is accustomed to hosting film shoots, nor are resources readily available there, but it was really, really a positive experience in collaborating with them to bring this world to life. And I mean, it has paid off. This film beat Bad Boys 2 in box office in the Eastern Cape, in the region that it was. Bad Boys 3. I don't know. The latest Bad Boys. And it was sold out for every screening until we were stopped by COVID. And that for us was a great indication of how these people really do want to see themselves in the content that they watch and how they will support that. So overall, I think we're really proud of the relationship that we have with the place that this film was created.
Mm. Yeah. And speaking to what you were saying about, you know, a place being a character and that coming through, I always had confidence in that happening in regards to this film, because I always knew, not only just by being from that space, but I always knew its dynamic, its cultural dynamic was very unique, based on its history. Just for our listeners and our viewers, just to give them a better sense of history. So Tanzania, being in the southern eastern part of South Africa, it's a ghetto township, I guess now you would call it that in terms of classification. It's part of a coastal town called East London. However, in the past, it used to be part of a banana republic called the Republic of Ciskei, based on apartheid and apartheid laws of creating these banana republics to kind of regulate travel and movement of labor. And back then, you know, growing up in that space, there was a weird sense of pride, even though this was a dysfunctional government in itself. There was a weird sense of nationalistic pride in that small little space. And that somehow carried through right across even and transcended the apartheid period in terms of people having some level of sense of pride. And then the uniqueness of the space is that the small township since 1994, it has yielded about close on to 17 world champions in different divisions of boxing. And one of the things growing up that I remember is that despite the poverty and the fascist rule of the state in that place, champions used to thrive. In a strange way, world champions would thrive. And in a strange and unique way where growing up, we always had these references, you know? You'd see a world champ, literally, whether it's Welcome Nita or Vuyani Bungu, rolling up in their big expensive cars, you know? I remember when I was in high school, Vuyani Bungu beat Kennedy McKinney to win the world title in 1994. He was in, what's the international equivalent to 7-7?
Grade. Oh my gosh. 7.
Nine.
Yeah.
Grade 9.
Grade 9.
This guy was in the 9th grade when he became world champion and he beat Kennedy McKinney. 9th grade. He lived, I remember, just down the road from me. He was 22 years old, but he was in the 9th grade, you know? So how do you balance that kind of situation? Coming back from that, literally a couple of weeks later, he's a multi-millionaire living in township apartheid South Africa. So we always had these references right there. And what it does to township kids, it gives you a sense of self, you know, especially in an environment that's eroding that a sense of identity and self. So I always knew that Tanzania had a particular kind of attitude about itself, you know. It's always considered itself a home of champions in that way, and never really let itself be bogged down by things like apartheid. So I always knew that character would come through in the film, and we didn't have to do much. Yes, the participation of the people in the community was a big part of that, but I just, you know, you just walk that place and it exudes that energy. Yeah, the people definitely have pride, irrespective of their poverty.
So, I mean, one of the most exciting things for me about the film as well is the music. Like when you hear the songs, it either makes you feel nostalgic or happy, or you want to sing along with it. Layla, can you chat a little bit, and you can also chip in, Jahmil, what were your conversations around the music selection? It's also very eclectic, so there isn't like one specific type of genre or song.
Well, I think myself, looking at Jahmil's previous work, music has always been a very distinct part of delivering the narrative for him. And what he's always done is juxtaposed soundtrack with the visual image. So we never ever want to use the song that you'd assume would be used in that scene, because we want to use it as an opportunity to deliver another layer to the message that we're giving with the story. For us, it's very important that we're pushing local and that our films are authentically South African. So we went into the archives of South African music, and all of our songs, barring one, are South African songs. So for us, it was important, like, let's see what the canon of South African music all the way back to the 60s can offer the soundtrack of this film. And obviously we've been inspired by great filmmakers like Scorsese and Tarantino, who really master that and use unknown gems within the context of the soundtrack. So we did spend a lot of time on it, and we wanted to give something that's South African, but also something that evokes different feelings and emotions and juxtaposes what's on screen.
And I think really we wanted the music to also say a lot about specific characters, specific individuals, you know, so we had that in mind, you know. The father plays a big role in the family, the notorious dad, and you know, a lot of that music in my mind's eye is his playlist, you know. And even though he died years ago, he's like this ghost that still just haunts this family. And the music does that, you know, even though it's set in contemporary 2019, when you listen to Dudu's music when he goes jogging, some of it he plays beats that his old man used to play, you know. And that is also part of our the layer of just talking, communicating the idea around inherited habits, which is a very big theme in the film.
So, I mean, you know, there's this saying that there are 3 films: one when you write the script, one when you shoot, and one in edit. So what was the editing process like? Because, you know, in my experience, I've always found it very challenging to have things land up on the cutting floor, and, you know, you have to make those narrative decisions post shooting, post your experience of writing the film that's best for whatever those 90 minutes or 100 minutes needs to be. So Layla, can you just talk about your thought processes when you started editing the film, and some of the arguments you may have had, or decisions, challenges you may have had about what those final features would be?
I think it's a beautiful process, and as we do more and more films together, we begin to understand in better ways how to work with each other for the benefit of the production. And I think Knuckle City really is a triumph in terms of its edit. It drew a lot on Jahmil's knowledge of boxing itself and the way that he shot it, and then also it gave me an opportunity to infuse it with a lyricism, which I think is very much my style and very feminine. So I'm proud of the edit process. It was a difficult process initially, but I always find now that there's one thing or one suggestion that somebody makes that just makes the whole thing click. And for us, ironically, that did come from our commissioning editor on it, who was Ty Skosana.
Go Ty.
There was just something not working in terms of the order of the flashbacks. And he came back to us and he said, why don't you try putting the death earlier of the father? And it was a very simple thing, but from there, it kind of gave the flashbacks their own narrative and journey, and they felt right, and we could work around that and perfect it. So there was a period where the scenes were beautifully cut, but the story overall we weren't happy with. And once we made that shift, it clicked in. So now, growing up as an editor, I look for that moment. I have faith until that moment comes, and then the film will be fine. So so it was a great process, a great collaborative process. Obviously, there are lots of arguments and back and forth, but that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, Jahmil, what is it when someone watches this film, whether it be someone sitting in Australia or America, or someone in Madansani, someone in Johannesburg, South Africa, or in Cape Town, any kind of person watching this film, what is it that you'd like for them to take away from this? What is the statement that you want to make, that you want to linger on after it?
Funny, that question is one of the questions I hope to avoid most of the time, you know, because you know, it's very difficult to kind of have to want to foresee an outcome for humanity, because we're so different. But if I had to even try, it's the idea of hoping to self-reflect. It's the idea of looking at self and being like, okay, these habits that make up me, are they actually part of my identity, or is it just something that I might have picked up along the way? And if so, what do they mean to me? It's just that internal discussion with self. I think that is my primary, which I tend to try and do with most of my work. If it gives you a sense of reflection once you've walked away from it, yeah, sure, think about the narrative, let it linger in your mind. But I hope at the end of the day, it gives you your own internal conversation. Yeah.
And I just to add to that, I think also it's a very exciting time now, because we're no longer making African content for foreign viewers. And I think that's had to be the trajectory previously, because you want your film to get into a European festival or appeal to a North American market. And what we've learned in this time is there's a very specific, I guess, expectation of what African cinema is supposed to be. And what we are really proud of with Knuckle City is that it really speaks to the people that it is intended to speak to. And I hope that comes across to viewers who are not familiar with the lifestyle or content or context of the film, but that it is authentically representing the people that it's intended to represent, and it's made for them. So I hope that comes across to foreign audiences.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. This was lovely.